Welcome everyone to our webinar. We're really excited to have you here today on our topic, health data security and why Australian organisations should secure it. So again, thank you all for joining. As we all know, protecting data in the healthcare industry is no easy feat, and healthcare providers and their business associates must balance in protecting one, patient privacy, and two, also delivering quality patient care and meeting the strict requirements set forth by HIPAA and other regulations. We also know that these data breaches can cost the healthcare industry millions of dollars. So it's important that we understand on why we should secure our data so that we don't fall into one of these breaches. My name is Davina Elengo, and I have a long history of healthcare industry with also 12 years of sales background. I recently work as a sales and marketing manager for ITSec, and I'm equally passionate about healthcare and cybersecurity. So it gives me gives me great pleasure to be your moderator today. So before I get into it, I'll just give a quick brief about today. We'll be running for 60 minutes. It will include a chat moderator, a Q&A chat bar. So please feel free to put your questions in throughout the session, and we will address it at the end, and our speakers will answer those questions for you. I'd also like to add, we'll be following the Chatham House rule, which is to aim to guarantee anonymous to those speaking within this wall or within this webinar. So we encourage you to participate, and we'll make sure your information and your identity is not revealed. So we're all here today because of this topic that is affecting many of our organizations. And I am honored to introduce to you our panel as well as our agenda. We'll be talking about health data and its constitutes. Health data trumps all other personal data, which is the rise of the new oil and why securing it is so important. We'll also be touching on the threat landscape, impact and risk for Australian companies, the one-on-one on Australian and global health data security laws and regulations. We will also be discussing the methods to the madness, HIPAA, high trust, and other frameworks. What is the secret sauce and recipe? How can we successfully implement a robust health data security program? And finally, insights, lessons learned, and common pitfalls by an industry expert. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our panel, and we'll be hearing from Brendan Rival, who is the head of IT for Capital Health for 3 years. Capital Health is a national network of community-based diagnostic imaging clinics and specialist radiology services. They have over 63 clinics under multiple brands with over 800 staff across 4 states, and they deliver over 1.2 million diagnostic images studies every year. And Brandon has been involved in helping boost and their cybersecurity footprint by providing a large-scale security uplift program to organization as head of IT. Brendan, would you like to say hi?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining.
Awesome. We will also be hearing from Aditya Uppappa, who is Chief Cybersecurity Officer at Isha IT. Aditya has spent a decade in cybersecurity and has varied skills and experiences across pen testing, red team assessment, and also helping clients who has varied skills and who's been helping clients in cybersecurity compliance goals. He's also aiding around global and leading enterprise and SMB businesses. Aditya is also a certified high trust practitioner. Aditya, would you like to say a few words?
Good afternoon, folks. Great to have all of you here today with us.
Awesome. And we'll also be hearing from Alvin Rafferty, the Managing Director of ITSec Australia. Alvin originally comes from an insurance and risk background where he spent over 13 years in insurance industry helping clients migrate across many verticals such as fintech, insurance, manufacturing, health, and government. Alvin has also had a passion for managing risk and had a very close interest to the emerging rise and threats that have been happening in the cybersecurity industry. Alvin, would you like to introduce ITSec Australia?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. IT sector, a cybersecurity MSP. We're originally from Singapore and Asia Pacific. In 2017, we expanded our operations into Australia, and we're now leveraging our services and delivering our services into the Australian market. And I would like to personally thank all of you for joining. And I really hope you get something out of this session over the next 50 minutes or so.
Thank you, Alvin. So let's dive straight into it. Aditya, can you talk us through some current environment for health data and the breakdown of the elements?
Sure. So I'd like to first start with the basics. What is health data? What are its elements, right? In Australia, your health records are called My Health Record or MHR. Around the world, it's called EMR, EHR, PHI. They're all one and the same, but they essentially constitute more than your name and your insurance details. What your health data records constitute are your record numbers, your photographs, images, scans, treatment dates, summary of medical aid or treatment provided, unique characteristics like your fingerprints, codes, numbers, past records, etc. So this is a wealth of information in your MHR today. In Australia, MHR has been active for the last couple of years, and it's grown over time, especially due to the era that we live in, which is due to COVID. Telehealth has seen a massive boom, right? That said, MHR is being leveraged to another degree altogether. What I see is two factions of folks today. Either you have the adopters and you have, individuals who are yet to adopt MHR. There's a lot of information that is provided about MHR and how can you secure it. But as an individual, you can log into either myhealthrecord.gov.au to go see your record, set up a PIN, see what kind of information do you have, set up a PIN to control access, etc. So all of those features are provided. So the Australian government has been working on strengthening it. But with that said, there is a long way to go from both an adoption and a security standpoint. At this point, I'd like to get Brendan's inputs as to how did they figure out the health data challenge and what did he see at Capital?
Yeah, thanks, mate. So as Davina mentioned, Capital Health, we're an ASX listed company, community-focused diagnostic image provider, very dispersed. We've got 63 clinics across Australia, with multiple brands. So just to give everyone, just a quick snapshot of what that means in terms of, I guess, the amount of healthcare data we hold, most of which contains, PII. So we have around 20,000 referrers, so, GPs and specialists in our systems, which, that contains their unique provider number, their address, their name. We hold roughly 2.5 million individual patient records, again, in our primary radiology information system, and that has Medicare number, full name, date of birth, address. And the next piece of data that we hold, is we're sort of reaching now 10 million, or we've just surpassed 10 million diagnostic images, so scans. That's going from the average Joe to AFL footballers, well-known public figures as well, is in our systems. I guess for us, the catalyst, or, what was kind of asked myself, what was the catalyst for us to start looking at doing a major security uplift? For us, it's really, and for everyone else probably on this call as well, it's really around the fact that, the protection of health information is critical to the success of our business. We'd be we're trying obviously to keep ourselves off the front page of the newspaper. And there's also other major factors, of course, that we briefly touched on already, that cybercrime is now the number one economic crime in Australia. So that was a big factor for us. Also, health services sector is the most targeted sector now for cybercrime. Again, very scary for us in healthcare. And of course, back in 2018, the introduction of the Australian Privacy Amendment Notifiable Data Breach Act. So yeah, there's sort of a few things that were the catalyst for us.
Great. So Brendan mentioned a very important point. Health information security is critical for the organization. At this point, I would like to talk about how health data today is mobile, right? And how it moves between various entities. Divina?
Yes. There we go.
All right. So why did I say health data today is mobile? It's no more just restricted in a hospital or a general physician's office. Today, there are multiple entities that come into picture for providing health secure, any health, and uh, yeah, health tech, etc. Right. So you of course have the patient, and the various entities that kind of bind around this particular individual would be the labs. You'll have the pharmacies, you'll have the insurance brands, you'll have the care managers, the government, of course, the community health services, all of your payers, imaging centers, etc. So it's a multitude of folks who do get access to an individual's health data. And because this is mobile, because this is no more restricted in, say, an hospital, it's gone beyond, on-prem systems as well. It's on the cloud. It's on, people's phones. It's between various vendors and service providers. That's exactly why it is so very important to look at, where is the information traveling, and you as an organization, what amount of health data are you taking into your organization, and what kind of safeguards do you have in place, right? I'm going to bring Brendan back again to just get a quick, a point or two about, how is that them as a health tech really combated this and thought through how can, how did they take in health data and how did they look to roll out health data security? Brendan, you're muted.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, I guess for us, what we did, we took a strategic approach to sort of three. I guess we could say we tackled this based around three primary steps. What we looked at from a strategic improvement perspective was to integrate. We wanted to make sure that we integrated security into the fabric of the organisation. To prepare as well. So to plan for what's expected, and also to prepare for what is unexpected. So that was sort of some key strategic steps. And the third one was, continuous improvement. So to continuously be honest and measure, where we're at. So, rather than just sort of put something in, put some sexy tools in and say that's it, is to continuously measure. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. All right. So going forward, at this point, I'd like to show you some statistics. Just like every business out there, it's very, very important to understand what kind of statistics are available, what is the real threat out there. So I'd like to talk about how health data is becoming the new oil. Now, of course, that's a term that is well used about how data is the new oil, but not all personal data is equivalent, because your health data has critical information about your past treatments, about your current conditions, your medicines, etc., right? Which can be, abused for various in various forms. That makes it more critical than other personal data. To give you an example, the average sale price per record on the dark web is about $429. Compare that to a credit card information, which retails at about between $5 and $10, right? So there's a big difference. That said, you can always get a new credit card. You can't get a new health record. Once it's out there, right? So I'd quickly talk to you about how, the breaches in the last couple of years have really impacted the health industry. What was seen was the top threat patterns have predominantly been human error, privilege misuse, and hacking. Now, when you see human error and privilege misuse, it's a very, very important point that I want to bring up here is the health industry is the only industry where the internal threat supersedes external threat. And that's so very important for service providers and health techs and all the other technology service providers to really think about, right? Because when you take in information, when you take in health data, it's your responsibility to secure this, right? The motives in most cases, of course, is financial, 83%, right? And what was the data that was compromised? About 72% was health records. Like Brendan mentioned, there are a bunch of folks from the AFL. You have a couple of celebrities. It could be anything. It could be information that's stolen, which is sold, which is used for blackmail, etc. So there could be a multitude of reasons, or ways that one could really exploit these compromised medical records. Now, talking about some statistics, I don't have statistics about Australia for the simple reason that, US was the biggest adopter of digital health and records, and and then came the other countries. And what we're seeing in America is going to follow suit in the other countries. So between 2009 and 2018, there were 2,500 breaches just in the US healthcare sector, out of which 6 million records were compromised, right? Just in the period of January to May, just in 6 months, there were 6 million records that were compromised. That's a massive number, right? And about 77% of all data breaches in 2019 were caused by healthcare providers. Now, these are massive, staggering numbers. These are numbers that are going to relay into the other countries that are fast adopting digital health records. At this point, I'd like to call upon my mate to talk about Australia and how does it really impact Australia.
Thanks, Aditya. So the last 24 months has been, obviously, we've seen a major shift from data moving to be online. So with more data moving online, obviously the rise of attacks in healthcare data has increased significantly. So we did we pulled out some studies. We uncovered that 1 in 5 organizations in Australia had suffered a health data breach in the last 12 months. And of those 1 in 5, 1 in 3 were due to human error, which was quite staggering. So obviously we're aware now of the notifiable data breach scheme that's come into place by the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, which requires you to notify your customers and the government of a data breach. So last year, 965 people came forward and advised the OAIC of a data breach. 65% of those 965 were genuine malicious attacks and malicious activity, and 35% were human error. And when I talk about human error, I'm talking about not someone sending a file by accident. I'm talking about the rise in social engineering, spear phishing, and business email compromise, and impersonating someone in order to transfer funds or sensitive information from one person to the other. So that's been a major rise. And obviously with the advent and the emergence of My Health Record moving to online, significant amounts of health data now have moved to that online, essentially creating more risk. And then the innovation boom of rising health tech, we all want to go to a dentist now and get an x-ray done, and we want it sent to an orthodontist almost immediately. That gets shipped or emailed to an orthodontist, almost instantly. But, and that's creating more replication, more volume of data online. And we always think about, how many people have access to this data, and no longer does your data go from point A to its endpoint in point B. It actually goes, your endpoint is point D or E, and it actually goes from A, B, C, D, E, F before it finally gets to its endpoint. So you think about how many people are touching that, how many people are exposed and have no proper training and understanding on how to manage health data, and how many times that gets replicated and put out there and duplicate copies made. So it is a significant thing that we are seeing in Australia today. Davina? Oh, you're on mute, Davina. Thanks, Davina. So when we think about health data, I think most people just think it's hospitals and it doesn't relate to them. So what we want our customers to understand is that a lot of us are touching health data without even knowing it, or actually know that they touch it and don't know actually how to properly secure it and what they should be doing about it. So we think about hospitals, but it's actually a lot of health tech organizations and software providers, healthcare institutions. Managed service providers are a perfect example. They're getting visibility into your network. They want to they're monitoring your logs, they're monitoring your emails, and they're all getting access to your health data. So these are some of the organizations. Hosting providers, cloud providers, lift and shift companies are also getting access to or need to have access to your data in order to properly perform the engagement from start to finish. And then as simple as your support centers and your IT service providers, they are also having access to your data. So all these companies need to be mindful that they're touching health data, and they need to be mindful and thinking about how they're going to secure that, because it's popular, it's the new oil, it's sensitive data that everyone wants their hands on. So they need to start taking some action and taking notice about managing patients' data and health data. Thanks, Davina.
Thanks, Alvin. So now I just did a poll actually, and so thank you, Alvin, again for giving us and highlighting the particular companies. I would like to move forward, and I did do the poll, and I'm going to bring Brendan into this to talk about some problem statements in health data security. Brendan, would you like to start? And I'll just wait for a few more to do the poll.
You good, Brendan?
All right, we're good.
Yep.
Just 1 second here. Got to exit the full screen mode. Yeah, so what we've done here is, just at a high level, we thought we'd list out some problem statements that I've faced, and no doubt everyone on the calls faced in the healthcare industry. We talk about unique threat landscape. We're dealing with internal and external threats. We're dealing with dispersed networks, human error, curious insiders, lack of physical controls within our clinics. Lack of security awareness is a major gap, from staff, and also, the introduction of telehealth recently has added a layer of complexity. Securing legacy systems. Again, legacy systems do take up a big chunk of our IT environment, currently for us and also for you guys as well, no doubt. And it's becoming more difficult, I guess, to keep them secure without causing downtime. For example, in my domain, please don't laugh at me, and I'm sure it's going to be a bit of an eek moment, but we still do have some old legacy modality machines like CTs and MRIs that connect to a Windows 7 box. So we got to sort of think outside the box to secure that workstation. Nothing new here for us IT folk. Budget's always hard to get, especially, I found initially in cybersecurity was hard. A lot of exec suites sort of, see it as just sexy, shiny new toys, and that's all IT folk want. So because often, a major security uplift does require upgrading infrastructure, upskilling staff, and of course, new software as well. So, a lot of spend for tools and people. So yeah, that is particular a major challenge, especially in these times as well, during COVID, under strict budgets. And also, the commonality of the business always trying to reduce the IT cost to serve. So, big challenge there. Data and securing in all formats. It's important to understand where all our data lies. So that is a difficult challenge to figure out where everything is hosted on-prem, through partners, providers, securing data in transmission. For example, for Capital, we send diagnostic reports to GPs. With 20,000 GPs, that's sent via a secure channel, but we'll often get requests from doctors to say, can't you just email me, that report. So we also partner with a AI company in the US. So of course, sending data over there, transmitted over the wire needs to be de-identified. So we got to think of data sovereignty as well. Scaling, poor hygiene or poor security hygiene. Sorry. Being able to rapidly scale your IT infrastructure to be able to adopt, new technologies, cloud or mobile, and challenges there is sort of the pressure to get things going without having, security practices within your, as I mentioned before, within your hygiene, your IT hygiene. And this one just seems to stick around no matter how advanced we get as businesses or, IT teams. Patching is always a problem. So, and in particular, patching old medical devices, because as we all know, ransomware still is, one of the most common attack vectors. Yeah.
Right.
Excellent. Thank you, Brendan. I've just got the results from the poll, and most of you said all of the above, but we actually have a lot in securing legacy systems has been at 30%. Most of you guys said that that's one of the main issues, and also a little bit more on scaling and poor security hygiene as well. So generally, all of the topics, with more than half that you guys said that you're having these problems. Aditya, did you want to touch on any of these, or shall I move on?
No, absolutely. I think everybody's got a spot on. I think all of the above is a big pain point. Next, followed by legacy systems. I know the issues associated to it, but that said, the poll stands correct. So over to you,
Definitely.
Alvin.
Yeah, same. I agree. Legacy systems, I think that is the biggest bugbear, but yeah, totally agree, guys.
And thank you, Brendan, for being so transparent and telling us what's in your environment. It really puts everything into perspective. We can resonate with you on this as the poll shows. I'm going to move on to the 101 on Australian Global. So Alvin, could you take it off for us?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, guys. So just a little bit about the security laws and regulations in Australia. We have the Notifiable Data Breach Act, which was introduced in February 2018. Now, the one good thing that the government are doing is rather than penalising you for a data breach, they're actually working closely with you because they want us in Australia to get on top of cybercrime. And unfortunately, at the moment, we don't seem to be winning the battle. We're heavily outnumbered. So, it's a great initiative from the government that they're trying to help us and work with us rather than slap us with a fine. So that's a fantastic initiative by them. Got the Privacy Act of 1988, which is a legislation of how we need to manage, secure and handle sensitive information, which is a fantastic legislation that was put into place. And then in more recent times, My Health Records and the My Health Records rule. Now, they are great rules to have and great legislations to have, but we need to have something more, a framework, so to speak, or a benchmark or a set of guidelines that we need to follow in order to manage health data. So fortunately, there's a global standard, and that global standard is heavily adopted around the world, and it is also being adopted in Australia at the moment, and that's called HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, which is how we need to handle Australia health data. And for those who want to go that step further, the high trust certification. And as we all know, anything with the certification instills more confidence within our customers, okay? If we are ISO compliant, customers know that you've gone through that rigorous process and you've done all the checks and balances to make sure that you're compliant, and high trust is recognized in that same format in relation to healthcare data. So with that, a subject matter expert is Aditya, who is just going to give you some more insight around high trust and HIPAA and how this is something Australian organisations can start to look to adopt.
Thank you, Alvin. So, like Alvin mentioned, there's been a rise in organizations in Australia trying to comply with HIPAA. And we've also started to see a staggering number of requests coming in for high trust. High trust being a certifiable standard for health data security makes it a gold standard that all health organizations are trying to attain. But that said, there are a ton of benefits just in a certificate to HIPAA or high trust in this case, is the fact that you get a structured program. You get a structured program of how can what kind of requirements do you need? What kind of controls should you have? How do you go about this entire process of rolling out health data security? And that's something that you get from HIPAA high trust vis-a-vis, regulations and laws. That said, what it allows you to then do is enables you to have data security across the organization. Look at your CIAs, look at how is data stored in transition, in how's it how's it encrypted in transmission, how's it stored, etc. And this indirectly helps reduce the chances of a security breach, right? Also, as part of this entire process, you go through a systematic identification of what are your most critical hosts, what are your workflows, where are all your risks that exist, what are your inherent risks, what are your vendor risks, what are your vulnerabilities, etc. So this basically helps identify all of that, right? And lastly, before you know it's often said that humans are the weakest link in security. That said, this really helps forward security in employees, because this creation of the mere policies and procedures associated with these standards and rolling them out across the organization, having various risk owners, asset owners accept these policy procedures, makes them directly liable for security, right? And lastly, brand reputation. This is a certification program. This enables you to showcase a superior security posture to your clients, right? That said, I'd like to quickly talk to you about HIPAA and what can you do to meet HIPAA requirements. Now, HIPAA's primary goal as a law in 1996 was to help keep health insurance, make it super easy, protect the confidentiality and the security of healthcare information, and to streamline the entire digital health record schema. Right. That said, there's no third party certification associated with HIPAA. Right. Now, I've listed out a couple of points just for the audience to understand, what kind of steps can you undertake in your organization to meet HIPAA requirements. So these are very, very simple steps. First is to draft a security and privacy policy, name a security and privacy officer, have someone responsible for it. Next is understand and identify the types of health data you have and where is it all located. Is it on a mobile phone? Is it on people's endpoints? Is it in your scanning devices? Is it on the cloud? Then do a risk assessment to understand what is your inherent risk, what is your vendor risk, what are your risks associated to you as an organization. Then go ahead and conduct technical analysis in the form of a penetration test, a vulnerability scan, write up your policy procedures, because those are very, very important for adherence, right? Because it really helps build a sense of security among your staff, have security awareness, and solidify all of your contracts with your vendors. This essentially is the recipe for success and for meeting HIPAA's requirements, right? And lastly, establish a protocol for breaches. Is similar to Australia. And I think lastly, it's very, very important to ensure that the policies and procedures are followed and not just these really nice pre-documents that are lying in SharePoint, right? So these are a couple of ways how you can meet HIPAA's requirements. Now, that said, I'd like to quickly talk to you about what is the difference between HIPAA and high trust. This is a very, very common question. Like I mentioned earlier, high trust is an assessment, and you can achieve a certification, whereas HIPAA is not, there's no third-party certification. The updates are based on the Congress, and it's not quite often, and there's no third-party independent contractor who can audit you against. Lastly, it's not very prescriptive. It's a guideline. But what high trust as a certification is more prescriptive. It is more robust from a security requirement standpoint. It not only requires you to write up your policy procedures, ensure adherence, but also requires you to implement those controls and have management and measurement for those particular controls. It's updated annually, so it ensures that the latest threats are factored. And lastly, it's a recognized gold standard for showcasing security amongst all healthcare organizations or any organization coming in contact with health data. At this point, I'd like to quickly show you a roadmap. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I like to talk about it in general. I think when you think about walking down the route of health data security, where do you start? You have to first understand, what does your organization do, right? How do you take in health data? Is there a way that you could reduce your scope? Is there a way that you could you could translate the risk in a different way? Is it possible for you to shift some of that risk? Is it possible to leverage service providers to reduce some of that risk? And then really start understanding, what are your most critical assets? Why are they critical? Define a target date. Then start working with your organization internally to select your implementation strategy and teams. Select your security officer. Start writing up doing a quick analysis or a gap assessment against the standard to understand how close or far you are from the standard, and then start really defining your controls. You might have gaps that is in security monitoring, so you identify, say, 3 vendors, and you go ahead and you define that as a control. The same thing might be, a control could be as simple as having a patch management system in place, right? So you have SLAs that are defined. So those are all controls, and you kind of formulate that, you write it up, you have the necessary folks responsible, accountable for it, and then you start mapping out your existing controls also. So once all of this is done, you've really understood, what kind of gaps you had, what kind of controls have you implemented, and what kind of existing controls do you have, right? Once that is done, you quickly move ahead to the assessment phase. At this point, I'd like to talk about how it's very, very important to update your policy procedures, ensure it really resonates well with the standard. Once your selection of controls, like I mentioned earlier, is done, go ahead and implement them. Set up some measurement mechanisms, and then go ahead, conduct a final assessment to understand whether you're actually meeting that particular requirement or not, and train your folks, and that's it. I mean, this is typically how an organization can meet health data security, right? That said, it's not very different from meeting the requirements of any general security certification or standard, but there's a special emphasis given on health data, and health data being mobile. It's very, very important to understand where all does your health data, flow, right? At this point, I'd like to call upon Brendan to give us some information about some of his experience. What did he see as a health data security implementer?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, mate. Yeah, look, what we did, we've just listed some common pitfalls there, or pitfalls that I face. But we started off by defining a goal, and what that goal was defined as was basically, to bridge the gap between speed of attack and speed of defense, to maintain confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data and business operations. So then what we decided was, all right, we've defined a goal, let's set out to achieve it. And in trying to achieve that, here's a bunch of pitfalls that that we come across. Disconnect between management or senior management and IT, the executive suite not understanding cybersecurity. A common maturity level is probably at the point of, don't you just need an antivirus? And as we all know on the call, we don't even use a tool antivirus anymore. It's advanced endpoint protection. So it's really about getting them on the journey. I actually sent a book on cybersecurity for dummies to the board members before I gave a presentation to get the funding. Stretch resources, something which I'm open to say I failed at was, I actually got the program of work approved, and then it was like, beauty, let's start rocking and rolling. But then I kind of had a bit of an oh shit moment and realized how we actually, with our resources that we have currently, how are we going to manage all these new products? And then it's sort of, well, I can't, if we have a breach, I can't blame the lack of funding anymore. I can only blame myself for not actually putting in the right resources, to support it. And experts to help you get through it. I think this is highly important. Utilize experts to help you navigate, through this crazy journey of what is the health security sector. For me, I want to give a shout out to the IT sec team, and their partners for helping me navigate through this crazy world of cybersecurity. Yeah, Alvin, that's a bit of an unpaid plug. I also saw a familiar face on the attendee list, RJ from Proofpoint, just another example of a strong security brand who have helped me on the journey. So, I certainly don't know it all, far from it, so, definitely recommend utilizing experts in the field and well-known, strong businesses that specialize in this sector. After we defined a goal, I'd reckon after you define a goal of what you want out of your security uplift, I'd recommend just 3 simple steps. Assess your current security posture, create a strategic improvement plan, and then operationalize it. And that's where I mentioned before, from that, we then came up with a strategic approach to cybersecurity, integrate, prepare, and then measure. That's it, guys.
Hey, Brandon. So that said, I'd like to quickly talk to you about a health tech, and very similar, but a health tech which basically grappled with the same issues, and how is it that they were able to combat it. So we IDSec came across a particular health tech. They needed help. They were a SaaS provider. They had a deadline to meet HIPAA and high trust requirements. It was a very, very short deadline. So they essentially leveraged experts to help them understand and how, really understand what are realistic time goals for them to hit, and how long they would take to meet HIPAA high trust requirements. Now, that said, there were a couple of challenges. This was an organization that was out of a WeWork. They had a couple of $1 million in funding, but they were absolutely unaware of the health data. They had rapidly scaled IT and infrastructure because they had grown quickly. They'd taken in a lot of funding. They didn't understand. They had very, very poor security maturity, and they had no in-house security expertise. At this point, because they started growing as a brand, they were being pushed to showcase security maturity to their clients and partners. And that's when they started thinking about security. And that's when they headed to the phone, gave IDSec a call. They wanted to understand how can, IDSec really help them through this particular journey. So how it was formulated was, I think the first step for any framework is to understand the lay of the land. So they did a discovery. They understood what kind of information they have, what kind of data did they have, segregate all of this data, de-identify only the health data and where it located. Next was do a high-level understanding of how good or bad they were, or more like bad or worse they were at that particular given time, to really understand the level of effort that's required. And started really working with this particular organization for writing up their policy procedures to help them understand what kind of controls, what kind of tools and technologies they would require to have in place to meet these two requirements, right? And this was also a part of doing all of these activities, was also to conduct a risk assessment and a pen test, identify all of your risks and vulnerabilities, and then draft up a roadmap for improvement, right? So once that's done, the organization set forth on this journey, this very, very short journey to implement, using this particular roadmap where they had all of these tools and all of these technologies, called out. Once that was done, the organization, the consulting organization, IDSec, came in, did a quick pre-audit, and that's okayed the entire effort. After which said point, this particular health tech went ahead for a high trust certification and successfully got certified within a record amount of time, right? And this allowed them to showcase a greater security posture to their end clients and partners. So that said, this is in a very in a nutshell, an explanation of how did an organization successfully implement health data security. Now, this is of course a great story, but Brendan called out a couple of pitfalls. But we'd like to quickly talk to you about, and Alvin wants to talk to you about, what are the things that an organization can really start implementing from tomorrow, right? So over to you, Alvin.
Thank you. So I guess the first thing I would love everyone to understand on this call is start with the assumption that you are going to get hit by a cybersecurity attack at some point, okay? Because it is now not a matter of if, but when. And when it happens, you will ask yourself the question, did you do everything you could to make sure you had a strong and robust environment? So start with that. If you start with that assumption, your mindset will be different on how you approach cybersecurity. But there are a couple of things you can do, some that have little or no investment that you can even start as early as tomorrow. The first thing you can do is just go into your organization and have a look at access and privilege and see who has elevated access within the organization. So, I mean, quite often, a lot of us have full administrational privileges, and that's a significant threat to the organization. And by reducing elevated privilege within the organization, you immediately start to reduce and mitigate the internal threats surrounding the organization. So that's something you can do tomorrow, would cost you nothing. Essentially, you could sit with your IT team and start to review the administrational and privilege within the organization. Consider two-factor and MFA authentication for your environment, something really important to do as well. You can start by doing the basics tomorrow as well. As we talked about patching, review your physical security. Can someone come and walk straight in with a USB stick and stick that into a machine and, copy data off immediately without being noticed? That's something you need to review. Review your passwords. We need to be better than password and welcome one as passwords now. We've got to start adopting proper password management. Secure your mobile devices. Our mobile devices now are walking computers. We've got access to OneDrive and Dropbox, and effectively all of the information is stored on these devices through Dropbox and OneDrive, and people can immediately get access to it almost instantly. And obviously conduct regular health checks, audits, and do pen testing. I can't stress that enough. If you haven't taken much of an approach, get some visibility into your environment first, because I'd rather know what I have and what my problems are than not know it all. And even if you don't have budget, it's still best to just get a risk assessment and understand where the inherent problems lie, so you can actually take that to management and say, well, I at least know what the challenges are. Whether or not you have budget to fulfill that straight away is another question, but at least you can start to get that visibility and address it. I can't stress this enough. The biggest discussion point between me and my customers for 2018 and 2019 was security awareness. I will tell you that attackers now have moved away from infrastructure. They now focus on people, and social engineering is one of the biggest things that we are seeing. And we need to start investing into our people and giving them the education and arming them with how to fight cybercrime. So, a leading endpoint vendor released a report. They did a research on 160 countries. Australia ranked 12th in ransomware attacks, of most hit by ransomware attacks. But what was more concerning and what was more alarming was we ranked 3rd in cost to remediate. So whether that be cost of we charge more, or we work harder, or we work longer, whatever it was, the cost to remediate, we were 3rd in over 160 countries. So that's quite concerning and quite alarming. And a lot of that stuff is due to giving your employees that education. Now, if you are going to consider an security awareness training program, there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of tools that you can actually obtain on the internet at no cost. But the one thing I will tell you, and one thing I will suggest, is for the most effective type of security awareness training, you want something that reinforces and has a continuous methodology model. So not doing one YouTube video or 2 videos a year and giving them a video to watch. It has to be a constant reinforcement tool or a service that does regular phishing simulation attacks and really reinforces that training on a regular basis. So that's my advice to you around, considering a security awareness training program. Backup and encrypt, I can't say there's enough. We should all be doing it. If you're not doing it, have a good backup and encryption program and backup to an offsite location. And if you can't do that, consider potentially a managed service provider. And last but not least, have a goal, have a benchmark, have a set of standards that you want to adhere to. If you're following an objective and a goal and a benchmark, that gives you something to work for and work to. And HIPAA and high trust, if you are in the health data industry, to global standards that are being adopted right now as we speak. And Australia already started to take notice of this, and Australian companies are already starting to implement this. ITSEC, we're trying to create more awareness of this, and it's something that, if you're in this health industry, I'd urge you to consider as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Alvin. So many very insightful takeaways. I'd like to thank all our speakers for a very informative session and for addressing some very important ways of building a robust health data security program, and also for touching some frameworks that we could mediate and strengthen our security posture. I'd also like to just take this moment to do some Q&A, and also I'd like to talk about the quick poll that we did just before. What are the biggest pitfall factors while implementing health data security? And I'd just like to say we have about 33% saying that picking the incorrect scope and lack of stakeholder buy-in, that was probably the highest one. And a lot of them were all of the above as well, but the highest was definitely that one I just mentioned. Yeah, so do we have any questions? Please pop them in.
So I see one question, Davina,
Yeah.
about, suggest we need to better understand what are we securing. How important is that to have a sound data governance process and practice in place to ensure that we understand what we are securing, who's responsible, and how much we should be securing it, right? I think that's a great question about really hitting the hammer on the nail. I can take a first stab at it. So what are you essentially securing? You're essentially securing your health data. One of the important points that I spoke about early on was to identify your scope. You, of course, might have terabytes of data or petabytes of data in some cases, right? It's very, very important for you to de-identify your health data and treat it with utmost care, right? And that should be your crown jewel, along with other critical assets that you're trying to secure, very, very robustly. Now, it is very, very important to have data governance processes and practices, right? If your team doesn't know how to react for a particular incident, if your team doesn't know that a critical patch has to be pushed out within 8 hours, right? That's not going to happen. It has to be in black and white. And these are things that have to be acknowledged and understood by your risk and asset owners. And why I emphasize on that term, ISO back in the day, would you say asset owners? That's now progressed to risk owners. Today, these asset owners are actually your risk owners, and they have the onus for ensuring that that particular risk doesn't get exploited, right? So it's very, very important that you have this governance structure, you have great, robust policy procedures, you have your standard operating procedures of how to do what in what scenario, right? Who's responsible? Another thing that's called out very well in these policy procedures about who's responsible for implementation. So that person has to be called out. Ideally, you should have artifacts to showcase how can you even push a particular patch in case your Linux administrator is on leave and there's a critical patch that's come out. Somebody needs to have the ability to do so on his behalf, even though they might be a more junior level resource, right? So it's very, very important to call out that responsibility and accountability, and the accountability would always lie with IT or security from a department head standpoint. And how much should you be securing? There's no limit to how much you could secure, but just ensure that you have these, these policy procedures and your necessary controls and tools in place, and they're working as per they're supposed to. Your security monitoring should not just be a checkbox, right? It should actually be doing a 24/7. Any thoughts, Brendan, that you may have?
I was just, I can't add anything further to that. I was just actually looking at the question by RJ here, but to that question, I think you answered it spot on. I can't add anything to that one.
The question that we've got next is, what are ways you are securing communication between your GPs, customers, suppliers, and partners? That's the first question. And the second question, how are you monitoring and trying to migrate human error leading to data breaches?
Yeah, so for our communication between GPs and us, we use a secure protocol via, it's called HL7, which is a report distribution method by a company called HealthLink. There are other companies that do it, but we use a company called HealthLink. For customers at this point in time, the only way they can get access to their reports is either via their GP, so it's sort of out of our control. However, we do get a lot of people asking if we can email their reports, which we certainly don't do. But in that instance, what we say is come into a clinic, show identification, and we can put it on a USB for you. Does sound a bit archaic, that method. We are looking at, as technology evolves, we're looking at patient portals for our patients to get access to that data. Second part, how are we monitoring and trying to mitigate human error? Through a range of tools. We have an AI tool actually in place over our environment, which looks for, or it identifies common patterns within our network for every user and for just general network traffic. And then, I guess, highlights uncommon patterns. So if I have X amount of emails per day, and I only go to my OneDrive or a couple of network shares, that's common behavior. Whereas if all of a sudden I've got an FTP connection from my workstation to Russia, then this system would identify that, and alert. So that could potentially mitigate data breaches, and also yes, again, through the guys at ITSec and their partners, we have our network monitored 24/7 by 365, to look for potential data breaches.
Excellent.
Yep.
Aditya, do we have time for one more question, or?
Yeah, Alvin, if you could just squeeze in a quick response, because you're the expert in Australia for the last question.
Sure. What I might do is I'm a stickler for time. I don't like to keep anyone longer than what we intended. This question from the last person, I'd love to take that offline and respond back to you personally. So I might just do that, just only because we might just go well over time if we do that. So if you don't mind, I will respond to you on that question straight after this.
No problem, Alvin. So thank you everyone for your time. We really appreciate you joining on our webinar, and I really hope it was insightful, and we really do look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. So please connect with us on LinkedIn, and we would love to connect with you there.
Thanks, everyone. And please, if you had
Thanks.
any other additional questions, please reach out to me on email or reach out to our team. And I'd like to also, once again, thank our panelists of Aditya, Davina, and Brendan as well. Thank you so much, guys.
No probs. See you guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.